What's up? Welcome to my channel. My name is Bailey Ruskus, also known as Chef Bay, and I'm a professional plant-based chef and a best-selling cookbook author of the cookbook Cook, Heal, Go Vegan. I am so excited that you're here and you landed on this video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want more tips and tricks in the kitchen, keep watching. This is also the place for exclusive videos to my podcast, The Plant Remedy. If you're interested in diving deeper in plant-based cooking or just want to incorporate a little bit of fun into your cooking routine, join our membership called Cook 5 Heal that you can cook with me live weekly, and it's so much fun. So I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you soon. What's up, you guys? This episode is sponsored by Mala Girl Broths. I have been on a hunt lately to find a good broth alternative that is free from canola oil, palm oil, excess sodium, and just like natural flavors and sugar. And if you guys have read the nutrition labels on the back of veggie broth boxes, you know that it's hard to find a really good clean broth that's environmentally friendly and doesn't cost you an arm and a leg. So that's why I'm so excited that I found Mala Girl Broths. You can use them as a broth for a soup, but you can also use them as a savory sip. So basically you just add hot water and you enjoy them as like a tea, which I love so much. They have ingredients like cordyceps and reishi and lion's mane and cacao, and they come in these super eco-friendly packaging, which I love, and it saves so much plastic from the boxes of broths. So let's check out a couple of my favorite flavors. This is the Fireball Basil, which is so great to add to any soup, and it's actually perfect if you're feeling under the weather as well. This one's a little bit spicier, and I also love this Mystic Maca as well. One of my absolute favorite ones that they have is the Classic, which I basically just pour some hot water into a jar, add the Mala Girl broths on top, and then I use it as my broth for my soup. I love making my own broth, but since I'm cooking all the time, I don't have time all the time to make my own broth. And so the Mala Girl broths is literally perfect for that, which is why I'm so excited that they're sponsoring this episode of the Plant Remedy podcast, because it is truly a product I absolutely adore, and the ingredients are super clean. There's no excess salt, there's no excess sugar, there's nothing but just like clean ingredients, sodium, and vegetable powders. So this is the real deal, you guys. If you want to grab some Mala Girl broths yourself, just go to malagirlbroths.com and you can order them online. I really like to get this little packet. You can get it's like a sample packet. You can get all of the broths at once, and especially if you haven't tried them yet, you can kind of play around and see what goes with what. I personally love to use them with lentils and to make my grains super flavorful by just mixing the Mala Girl powder with water and then adding it to the grains. So I'm gonna leave the link below in the show notes so that you guys can kind of check it out, cruise their website, and then let me know what you think. And then be sure to tune over to my Instagram and TikTok at chef_bay, and I'm going to be making some recipes with the broths so that you can see them firsthand how they work. So again, you can go to malagirlbroths.com, that's how you spell it, and try it out and let me know what you think. Okay, let's get into this episode with Cyrus from Mastering Diabetes. All right, I'm sitting here with Cyrus from Mastering Diabetes. Hello, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
How you doing, Bailey? It's good to see you too.
I'm really good. Well, it's a brand new year. So how are you feeling about 2022?
I'm hoping that 2022 can be better than 2020 and 2021 combined. I really feel like it has the potential to do so. It's just that the last 2 years have probably been the weirdest years in any of our recent memory, but you know, they're learning experiences, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely big shifts are happening. I feel like we're all really tired of the shifts, but shifts are happening nonetheless. And I feel like it's how we grow, it's how we change, it's how we evolve, right?
So true.
Do you have any
your biggest take home from 2020?
From 2020 or 2021?
Give me your biggest take home from both years.
I don't know. I just think that just the simplicity of life is the most valuable thing that we have. You know, those like little baby day-to-day moments that you can take for granted, I think are the most powerful and important things that we do. What about you?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think my biggest take home from me was that your mental health is extremely important, because I saw so many people, friends, family members, who were whose mental health got worse over the course of time because they were isolated. I mean, we are social creatures. If you take that away from us, all of a sudden, like, isolation sets in, and it just becomes like a smaller and smaller universe. So I'm always trying to think from the perspective of like, how can I construct my lifestyle and interact with people in a way around me to like maximize everybody's mental health, myself included. And it like makes a big difference in just making sure that like the lifestyle you've constructed actually works in the long term.
Yeah, that's super true. I'm feeling that because, I wrote and launched a book between 2020 and 2021. And the last couple of months is the first time that I've actually been feeling what everyone else is feeling, because I haven't been so focused on like work and book launch mode and all the stuff. And I'm just like, wow, the world is so heavy. I've had blinders on because I've been in like this little bubble.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And yeah, so I'm like, wow, this is what everyone's been feeling for 2 years. This is crazy. Like, what are we doing? So I totally feel that.
I think 2022 could be, honestly, could be a great year for like, for many reasons. But one of the things that I actually would love to see is that the quote unquote authorities in this world, please talk about lifestyle modifications that can help boost your immune function and lower your risk for chronic diseases. I mean,
oh my God, I know, right?
I just like, it blows my mind that we're 2 years into a pandemic, or almost 2 years. And, there's still no like central authority who's giving out recommendations for like, maybe you should move your body. Maybe you should try and modify your diet. Like, where is that conversation? It just blows my mind.
Yeah. There's no money in that conversation though. I mean, but who knows? Hopefully things can change. I don't see that happening, but I think with these types of conversations, people like you and I feel like this community is amazing. And the fact that I think the people are desperately seeking that. People are desperately seeking more of this common knowledge for, improving our health. I mean, when you look at when the pandemic first happened, the amount of people that were dying because they had 2 or more underlying health conditions, and then they got COVID, it was just kind of like crazy. So I hope, the government sees that as well, where it's like, we got to do something about this. But there's also, you talk about lobbying, you talk about all the politics that go into all the food that we're eating. It's such a big thing to tackle.
I know. It's like too overwhelming to really like wrap your head around, but there's a lot of special interests that want to not talk about natural health alternatives to, the medical model. And you and I both know that lifestyle modification and eating a plant-based diet is like literally one of the most powerful things you can do for your overall well-being, and to not only not manage your chronic disease status, but actually reverse many chronic diseases. And we can get into the details of diabetes and obesity today for sure. But yet again, like I think there's just a large proportion of not only the like regular people who don't know that reversal is possible. And secondarily, I think there's also a lot of medical professionals who just have no concept that it is possible to reverse conditions like diabetes and heart disease and cancer, because they've never seen it before. And that's okay. They're not bad people, but we just have to evolve as a species.
Yes, I love the way you just said that. It's true. And it's also down to, education, and down to just kind of like from the beginning, how doctors are being trained into medications and symptom treatment and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm so excited to dive into all of this and talk about it. This is the first question I ask all my guests, mainly because I'm a chef and I'm just so curious, but what is your like favorite plant-based meal right now?
Favorite plant-based meal, a giant bowl of mangoes.
A giant bowl of mangoes.
It's real simple. So I've been addicted to mangoes ever since I was a little kid. My family's from India originally. And when it was dessert time, what would happen was that, most families are like, okay, cool, it's dessert time. And they go get the brownies and the cookies and the ice cream and they put it on the table, right? Well, what my parents did was my dad would go to the little cats here.
Oh, hi, buddy. He's so cute.
This is Mew. She likes to participate in all of these conversations.
Oh my gosh, I love that. My dog is like, anytime I'm on Zoom, she's always trying to get up too. It's so funny.
Oh, she is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like they know there's energy happening here.
Totally. They can
Mhm.
feel it. Okay,
Yeah.
so oh, well, we have another member of the family that also wants to say hi. This is Blue.
Blue,
Hi.
like your background. I love it. Hi,
Yep.
Blue.
Okay. So so go backwards. My dad would go to the Indian market and he
Yeah.
would go buy a particular type of mango called the Alfonso. I'm sorry, the champagne mango. So he
Mm.
would bring it home, and then when it was dessert time, he would literally just put the box, like an entire case of mangoes, on the table, and he'd be like, "Eat. That's your dessert." And so as kids would just like dive into these mangoes and just start eating them, and I was like, "Oh my God, this tastes better than ice cream."
Yeah, it's so good.
So, over the course of time, I've just become a huge mango fan, and there's a lot of really tasty varieties.
So like, how is it getting mangoes in outside of Philly in the winter? Is it hard?
It's not the greatest thing in the world, I'll be honest. During mango season, which is usually like April through
Yeah,
October or
of
so,
course. Then it's
it's
easier.
much easier to get. So like
Mhm.
in the wintertime, I'm not even focused on mangoes. It doesn't even matter. I just wait for like April to roll around, and
Like
then that's when
waiting.
I go crazy.
Okay. I don't know if you've heard of the company called Miami Fruit.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. So I was like, if you have a mango craving, you can't get rid of. You could get some good ones from them, probably.
for sure. They also have some pretty obscure varieties that just literally, like, the only description I have for how they taste is they taste like flowers. Like, I've never tasted a flower before, but you eat it and you're just like, wow, this is a flavor I've never had before.
Oh
This
my
is
gosh.
unbelievable.
I've actually never ordered fruit from them because I'm in San Diego, so the shipping is just like astronomically expensive. So I've never
Mhm.
done it. But yeah, every time they post, I'm like, God, I just gotta bite the bullet and pay the $100 for
Totally.
shipping just to get this fruit in my life for a minute.
Wait for mango season. Trust me, it's worth it.
Okay. Okay. Well, they have like everything, like cacao, they have like all the things. So anyone listening, it's called Miami Fruit. They're on Instagram. So if you're interested in like crazy tropical fruits and you want to get them shipped to you, that's the way to go.
Yeah.
Little plug for
We're
them.
huge fans of Miami fruit, so we
Yeah.
second that as well.
I love that. So I'd love to hear a little bit just like about your history, just so that if listeners are unfamiliar with you, they can kind of hear where you're coming from and how you kind of got to this place.
For sure. Okay, so I grew up as a pretty active kid, and I played every sport under the sun, from soccer to baseball to swimming to basketball, you name it. And when I got to college, I noticed that my energy levels went down significantly. So it was like senior year of college. It was 2002, and I was trying to study for finals, and all of a sudden I was just like, wow, I am incredibly thirsty, and I am incredibly tired. So I would like drink some water, put it down, and try drink more water.
You're there. Hi.
Okay, sorry, my internet just quit here. Give me 1 second. There we go. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, we'll back up there. Okay, so by the time I got to college, I recognized that my energy levels started to decrease and come down pretty quickly. So there was a time where I was studying for finals in 2002 in my senior year, and I was studying mechanical engineering at the time, and I had to, really put in a strong effort to like do well in finals. And my thirst was unbelievable. Like I'd never experienced this level of thirst before. So I would drink some water, put it down, and then 5 minutes later, I was like, wow, I'm thirstier. Then I would drink more water, and I put it down, and I was like, I just got thirstier again. And it's just like kept on happening over and over and over again. In addition to that, I got really tired.
Mm.
In addition to that, because I was taking on so much fluid, I ended up going to the bathroom every 30 minutes like clockwork. And then in addition to that, because I was now flushing electrolytes without even knowing it, when I would go to sleep, after like 5 minutes of being asleep, all of a sudden I would get a muscle cramp. And that one muscle cramp would turn into a second muscle cramp, and then a third muscle cramp. And there were times where I was literally lying in bed feeling like I had full body rigor mortis. And I was like, something is wrong. Picked up the phone and I called my sister, and she's a doctor of osteopathy, family practice physician. And I said, hey, what is going on with me? And she started crying immediately. She was like, oh my God, type 1 diabetes, go straight to the health center now. And I was like, diabetes? What are you talking about? I don't have diabetes. And she's like, I don't have time to explain, just go. And the only thing that I knew about diabetes at that point in my life, or the only thing I thought I knew, was that diabetes had something to do with old people and cake. And I was like, okay, well, that's not really me. So
Yeah.
what are we going to do here? So anyway, I go to the health center. They check my blood glucose. It's supposed to be between approximately 70 and 130 on any given day. and it was 600 plus. And then they transferred me to the ER. I go to the ER and they monitor me for 24 hours and they bring my blood glucose down using insulin. And then while I'm in the hospital, they diagnosed me with 3 autoimmune conditions: type 1 diabetes, Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, and alopecia universalis, which is basically total hair loss. So you can see I have no hair, no eyelashes, no eyebrows. I got nothing. I'm a hairless wonder. So all 3 of those were diagnosed at that moment in time. And I was like, oh my God, what did I do to myself? Is this my fault?
What a day. What a day.
It was a rugged day for sure. So long story short, I ended up following their recommendations to eat a low carbohydrate diet, because people who are diagnosed with any form of diabetes, whether it's type 1 or prediabetes or type 2, everybody's given the same blanket recommendations. It happened back then in 2002. It's literally still happening today, 2021.
Yeah.
2022. And the recommendation is eat a low carbohydrate diet, because carbohydrates are bad for you. If you eat it, you are allergic effectively to carbohydrates. Treat it as though you're allergic to carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are toxic for you. You literally hear those words come out of medical professionals' mouths. And they say, if you eat a low carbohydrate diet, then number 1, your blood glucose will stay stable. And number 2, your insulin use will also stay nice and low. So I said, hey, listen, I don't know anything about biology. Cool. Sounds like a plan. So I did that for a year, and my health got worse and worse and worse. I already had very little energy. It got worse. I was having a very difficult time exercising. My muscles hurt. My joints hurt. My blood glucose was a disaster, absolute disaster, roller coaster all day long, every day. And so after about a year, I was like, you know what? I don't think this is working. I think I'm going to try and find another way out. So I started doing some research and talking to people, and one thing led to another. And I got introduced to this idea of being a plant-based eater. So let's go backwards in time. This is 2003 at this point. And there isn't really being a vegetarian is not cool. Being a vegan is not cool. No. It's not popular. People are not talking about it. It's not even on social media. Facebook had literally just come out the week. And so there was nothing exciting about this idea of eating a plant-based diet. But I was like, hey, listen, if this is going to make me feel better than I feel right now, I'm in. Just tell me what to do. So I transitioned to eating not only a plant-based diet, but actually a low-fat, raw plant-based diet. And I was like, great. I was like, a plan. Let's do it. So I started eating basically mainly fruits and vegetables. And within a very short period of time, I'm talking 1 week, my insulin use got cut by 35 to 40%. Which is a very big deal for somebody with type 1. My blood glucose went from being high all the time to boom, very low. I had to back off on the amount of insulin I was giving myself to prevent myself from going too low. My energy levels came back very quickly. I was more hydrated. I could sleep better. My anxiety kind of just vaporized. And before I knew it, a month into this lifestyle, 2 months into this lifestyle, I was like, whoa, this feels great. I want more of this, right?
Yeah.
So I put myself back to graduate school because I was like, you know what? I want to learn the science here, because just being an N of 1 story is cool, but not that cool.
Yeah.
So when I was at school, I enrolled at PhD programs so I can really study the science. And I went to UC Berkeley for 5 years to study nutritional biochemistry so that I could understand the nitty gritty details of what's happening in my pancreas and my liver and my muscles and my kidney and my brain, and how are they talking to one another. And while I was there, I was given the opportunity to really delve into diabetes and figure out what causes it, and how can you not only treat it and manage it, but how can you reverse prediabetes and type 2, and how can you manage type 1 with precision. And so while I was there, my mind was blown, and I learned so much about the power of a plant-based diet in particular for solving, if you will, insulin resistance and prediabetes and type 2, and being an incredibly effective management tool for type 1. And that's led to today with the creation of a business called Mastering Diabetes that teaches people how to do this in a step-by-step manner as you go through a coaching program.
Wow. So epic. And honestly, so revolutionary for all the people that have diabetes or know someone that does. And just to kind of get your head around how many people are suffering with this disease. I would love to hear some statistics about diabetes and what we're really up against.
Yeah, that's a great question. So think about it this way. Right now, the United States population is probably 350 million people, plus or minus a few. Okay. So the number of people that have been officially diagnosed with diabetes, either type 1 or type 2 or pre-diabetes, is approximately 35 million. So call it literally 1/10 of the population.
That's a lot of people.
So yeah, 1/10 of the population basically has an official diagnosis from a doctor that says you have diabetes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are an extra approximately 85 million other people who have pre-diabetes and don't even know about it. They are undiagnosed pre-diabetes. Pre-diabetes is the precursor to type 2 diabetes. And because they're unaware of it, they are likely to turn into people with type 2 diabetes in a short period of time.
Right.
So if you add the two of those numbers up together, you take 35 million, you add it to 85 million, and then you end up with 120 million people, right? 120 million out of 350 million and change is 1/3 of the US population. 1/3 of the US population, 1 in 3 people has a blood glucose irregularity. Majority of those people have no idea. And that's a pretty scary prospect.
Definitely, because it's also, it's linked to other things too, like heart disease. Like, I'd love for you to talk quickly just about, the link from diabetes to heart disease and why being pre-diabetic is really scary if you don't know that you have it, and how it can lead to other things.
Yeah, for sure. So pre-diabetes is one of those interesting phenomenon in which the way that you find out that you have pre-diabetes is because most people just go to the doctor and they go for their annual checkup. So they see their doctor basically does a bunch of blood work on them, and they test 2 markers of their blood glucose metabolism that could be warning signs. So the first marker is just their fasting blood glucose value. And in an ideal world, your fasting blood glucose value would be less than 100 milligrams per deciliter. Just call it less than 100. If your fasting blood glucose is greater than 100, so between 100 and 124, then your doctor usually takes a look at that number and goes, wait a second. Your fasting glucose is elevated. That is a sign of prediabetes. If your fasting blood glucose is 125 or greater, then that's a sign that you already have type 2 diabetes. Okay. So that's the first marker, is fasting blood glucose. The second marker is called your A1C value. Your A1C value is basically just a measure of how much glucose has attached itself to hemoglobin inside of red blood cells. Okay. And so that number is measured as a percentage. So in a non-diabetic individual such as yourself, if you got your A1C measured, your A1C would be 5.6% or less, meaning 5.6% of all the hemoglobin in your blood would have glucose attached to it. And that is a perfectly normal physiological phenomenon. But if you develop prediabetes, then what happens is that your A1C gets slightly elevated. It gets between 5.7 and 6.4%. And then if you have an A1C value that's 6.5% or greater, then that means that you have type 2 diabetes. So your doctor would look at one of those 2 numbers or both of those numbers and then come to a logical conclusion about whether you have prediabetes or type 2. Okay. Now, in the case of people living with type 1, like myself, we end up presenting in a emergency situation because type 1 diabetes happens seemingly overnight, right? There's no warning signs. You just kind of like wake up one day and all of a sudden you're like, I feel terrible.
Yeah.
And things don't seem right. And then maybe, 24 hours, 48 hours later, you check yourself in just like I did. You go to the hospital and all of a sudden they're like, oh, hey, by the way, your A1C value is not slightly elevated. It's not like it's a 5.8.
Right.
Your A1C value is a 10.9. Did you know that?
Crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
Or your fasting blood glucose isn't 113. Your fasting blood glucose is 700. I mean, we're talking like different
Crazy.
ballpark
High.
altogether,
Yeah.
right? So long story short, to answer your question about what's the correlation between diabetes and heart disease, the answer is the underlying condition in prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, which affects the majority of the diabetes population, is a condition called insulin resistance. So you can think of it as a series of dominoes. Insulin resistance is the first domino. When you push that one over, it then can turn into prediabetes if untreated. And then if prediabetes is not treated, it turns into type 2 diabetes. So it's a 3-way domino system, right? So the precursor to prediabetes is insulin resistance, and insulin resistance is caused by your lifestyle. It's caused by your diet. It's caused by the things that you choose to do or the things that you choose not to do on a daily basis. And from, being in this world for more than almost 20 years at this point, and from having read thousands of papers on insulin resistance to really get to a point where you understand like fundamentally what is the problem, the most powerful and the easiest way to induce insulin resistance in any human being, in fact, in any mammal, whether it's even a monkey or a mouse or a raccoon, is to feed them a diet that contains a significant amount of saturated fat. And this is kind of like an aha moment for most people, because the rhetoric in the world of diabetes is that diabetes is caused by sugar.
Right.
You got diabetes because you drank too much soda. You got diabetes because you like Twinkies, or you got diabetes because you like to eat crackers and cookies and pastas and breads,
milkshakes and ice cream. And yeah,
exactly. So you like sweet things, and those sweet things contain sugar, and sugar is what causes diabetes. The truth is that refined sugars like white table sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and a whole collection of artificial sweeteners, yes, they can certainly cause insulin resistance to your liver, which can then snowball into prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. But there's a much faster way, and there's a much more effective way. And there's a way that that most people in the United States eating the standard American diet fall victim to without even knowing it. And that is that they consume a diet that contains a significant amount of saturated fat. And the saturated fat, what it does is it actually gets stored inside of your liver and inside of your muscle in excess quantities, because both of those tissues are places where saturated fat can accumulate, but both those tissues are designed to store very small amounts of it. So when they're forced to store too much because there's too much going into your mouth, then they end up basically having, they decrease the ability to communicate with insulin, because they're trying to create a self-defense mechanism to prevent more energy from coming inside of both of those tissues. And the most effective way they can do that is by basically blocking the action of insulin. So effectively what that does is it causes insulin resistance or insulin blockade or insulin rejection at the level of your liver and at the level of your muscle, which then causes a metabolic traffic jam, causing your pancreas to manufacture more insulin than you normally would. And as a result of that, your blood glucose can also get elevated, because glucose is trapped inside of your blood and cannot get out and get inside of your liver and get inside of your muscles. So insulin resistance is really the root cause of both of those conditions. And it turns out that insulin resistance is actually one of the most powerful precursors to heart disease at the same time. And that's where it gets really interesting, because insulin resistance is a condition that influences almost every chronic disease that you can think of today.
Wow.
And that includes all versions of diabetes, plus many different versions of heart disease, whether it's coronary artery disease, atherosclerosis, hypertension, high cholesterol. It can also dramatically increase your risk for many forms of cancer. It negatively affects women who are living with polycystic ovarian syndrome, because they become insulin resistant physiologically. And then it can also negatively affect your kidney and elevate your risk for chronic kidney disease. It can elevate your risk for fatty liver disease. And now research over the past 20 years has just shown that you can actually, insulin resistance can cause dementia and Alzheimer's disease 30, 40, 50 years into the future. So
yeah, when I first read about that, I was like blown away, mainly because, especially when you hear about Alzheimer's and dementia, like my grandpa had dementia, it's this thing where it's like, well, it just happens, that's it. It just happens, and that's a scary thought as a human being, thinking like, this could just happen to me. There's nothing I can do. But to read all of that information there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of power in reading like, oh, like I can prevent myself from going through this, or my family from going through this in the future.
Absolutely. And I would say actually the same narrative exists for cancer as well.
Yes, 100%.
Because there's a lot of people who fear that at some point they're going to become a statistic, right? And that it doesn't matter what you do, or, it kind of matters what you do, kind of doesn't matter what you do, but at some point you will likely develop cancer. At some point you will likely develop Alzheimer's disease, and there's not much you can do about it today to prevent you from developing it 30, 40, 50 years into the future.
Yeah.
But the problem is that both of those are false statements. And we know this now from plenty of evidence-based research. It's just that like the narrative has taken a long time to sort of change in people's heads.
Right.
And, hopefully it will change over the course of time.
Okay, I have 2 follow-up questions to this because this
Sure.
is just like so interesting. I mean, the first one is talking about genetics and just talking about the idea of like, oh, I'm going to get this no matter what. I know it's definitely like rhetoric that happens in my family. For me, like my grandma had ovarian cancer. Some of my cousins have endometriosis, but also when it comes to heart disease and diabetes, like all of my grandparents died from dementia, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, like literally all of them. No one died from just like old age, and
Right.
just like, they were in their 90s, just fell asleep and didn't wake up one day. Literally, it was all this traumatic, drawn out, horrible health crisis. And it's kind of just been this thing. And I know for most people, it's very similar where it's like, you're going to get one of these things. And I'd love to talk about the connection to genetics and diabetes, and also the connection to whether it may not be genetics, it might just be tradition, and, the crew that you hang out with.
Yeah, that's a great call. Okay. So let's make a differentiation here between the autoimmune versions of diabetes, which is type 1 and 1.5. Okay. So I'm going to put autoimmune in one bucket, and then I'm going to put non-autoimmune in the second bucket. And the second bucket is prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. Okay?
Yes.
So when it comes to autoimmune diabetes, which is type 1 and 1.5, me living with type 1, there's a strong genetic connection.
Right.
Okay. So what that means is that you can inherit one or multiple gene mutations that can then predispose you to the development of type 1 or 1.5 diabetes in the future. So you inherit that DNA, at birth, and then the gene expression, or the expression of those genes that then turn into functional protein, it could take a very long time for that to unfold. Okay. So type 1 diabetes generally sets in young kids at the age of like 8 or 10 or 15 or so. But there's actually over the past 12 years, there's been like a 23% increase in the number of young kids who are developing type 1 diabetes. And this is going up for the first time in human history. We've never seen this before, right? And type 1.5 diabetes is basically, you can think of it as like autoimmune diabetes that affects people after the age of 30. So it's a little bit slower of an onset, but again, it has a genetic precursor. All right. Now, when it comes to the non-autoimmune versions of diabetes, which is prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, most people believe that they are going to develop prediabetes or type 2 because their sister had it, because their mom had it, because their grandfather had it, right? And so they believe that they're just going to become a statistic at some point in time. And the truth is that, yes, there are genetic precursors to prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, as there are genetic precursors to obesity, but your lifestyle, the food that you choose to eat, the exercise that you choose to do, the amount of alcohol that you choose to drink, whether or not you smoke cigarettes at all, whether you perform intermittent fasting or not, those things matter. And those things absolutely trump the genetics that you may have inherited. Okay,
Yeah.
so you may have inherited a whole collection of genes that can predispose you towards prediabetes and type 2 diabetes when you're in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. But if you've constructed a lifestyle earlier than that, in which you're eating primarily plant-based foods, you're lowering your total saturated fat content, you're exercising on a regular basis, you're performing intermittent fasting periodically, all of those things can basically nullify, effectively turn off the gene expression that would result in prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, and make it so that you never even have to use those words. You never have to worry about them at any point in your life.
So crazy. I love that. And I think, that's such a misconception for a lot of people. I mean, I'm even just, I have clients, I've been working with people for so long, but of course, you always just think about your family first. And I think about so many members in my family where they just automatically think that they're going to get heart disease or diabetes. And I'm like, you guys, no, like, let's change like the
Right.
course of how we're living and dying and not dying and all of these things. So my second
Correct.
follow-up question would be around saturated fat and popular diets like the keto diet, the carnivore diet, and just like the misconceptions and the misinformation that is flying around everyone's head right now, and kind of just like clearing up some of those misconceptions. I know we've talked about keto before on the podcast, but yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective on it. And I'm sure you have a great one, just talking all about it from a diabetes perspective.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
just like meat and dairy intake in general, because I know that some people want to go half in, half out. Like sometimes they'll eat plant-based, sometimes they'll eat meat and dairy. So I'd love to just kind of see the full spectrum from being like completely keto to being somewhere in between to then being plant-based, and like how healing can really happen on any of those spectrums, if at all.
Good point. Okay. So let's start out by saying that I know ketogenic diets have become extremely popular for all demographics, right?
Right.
It used to be that ketogenic diets were extremely popular for people that had some type of like disease to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Back when Atkins made it popular in the early 90s, it was mainly used as a weight loss tool, or he marketed it as a diet that would help you lose a significant amount of weight, right? So the weight loss population were using it, but like young kids in college, they weren't gravitating towards the Atkins diet because they had no reason to, right? But then over the course of time, as the Atkins diet, which is effectively a ketogenic diet, got rebranded multiple times.
Wait, before you go on, I just want to say this fact that I learned about the Atkins diet is that he had millions invested in supplements, like in the supplement industry.
Yeah, for sure.
So like, I always find that really interesting is he's steering people away from like fruits and vegetables and stuff, but he's selling the supplements of what those fruits and vegetables could give you. So I just wanted to like have that little like fact for our listeners that it's like not always like the best interest of the person creating these diets for you. It could be for something totally different.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, the same thing still happens today.
Exactly.
Because if you listen to a lot of these health professionals who tell you to eat a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet, they say, but the only way that you can do it successfully is if you buy a magnesium supplement and an omega-3 supplement and a calcium supplement and an iron supplement. And before you know it, now you have a whole litany of synthetic supplements to go along with your quote unquote healthy carnivore diet or your healthy ketogenic diet. But if you take a look at the overall biochemistry, it just doesn't make any sense. Right?
Yeah. Okay. So go on.
Okay. So the Atkins diet was a low carbohydrate diet. The low carbohydrate diet has gotten rebranded multiple times since that point. It went from Atkins, it went to South Beach, then it went from South Beach to the paleo revolution. Then from paleo, it went to keto, and that's where we are today. Right. So all of these different types of diets are basically just like different versions, version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4 of the low carbohydrate methodology. And the truth is that the ketogenic diet is going to be rebranded probably sometime in the next 5 to 10 years. You and I will live through that, and it's going to be renamed as something else. And there's going to be a whole bunch of new health professionals that are going to be talking about this new diet and how it's different than the ketogenic diet. And it's going to be the same low carbohydrate methodology recycled into something new. And then it's going to happen again when in 2030 and so on and so forth, right? So just get used to it, right? But the point here is that the idea of eating a low carbohydrate diet is that number one, you can lose weight while eating a ketogenic diet, okay? And that is a true statement. There are literally millions of people around the world who eat a ketogenic diet, which is a very low carbohydrate diet in which your total carbohydrate intake is less than 30 net grams of carbohydrate per day, okay, meaning not including fiber, okay? So if you're eating basically about 30 grams of carbohydrate energy per day or less, then you're deriving the bulk of your energy from protein and fat. And when you do that, well, it turns out that you can lose a lot of weight. It's very counterintuitive because if you had me guess, if you like wrote down a bunch of stuff on a piece of paper and had me take a look at the biochemical pathways and the mathematical equations, I would not guess that eating that way could help you lose weight, but that's what happens in this biological machine in which we live. And part of the reason for that is because when you eat fat-rich foods and protein-rich foods, they're very satiating. Okay, so a small amount of those foods, not only do they provide a significant amount of calories, but they actually can control the neurological circuitry between your digestive system and your brain. And so when you're consuming a lot of fat and protein, there's neurological signals that are being sent up to your brain that rewire the way in which your brain asks for food. So it's called your appestat, and your appestat basically gets turned down. In other words, your appetite gets turned down. And as a result of taking on a significant amount of energy, mainly from fat-rich foods, because fat makes up about 70% of the calories that you're consuming on a truly well-constructed ketogenic diet.
So much.
It's unbelievable. It's
Oh my God.
unbelievable. But when you do it that way,
Yeah.
the fat effectively is the catalyst for creating this signaling up to your brain, and your brain basically says, hey, I'm not going to eat as much food. So as a result of that, people who are eating a ketogenic diet actually become calorie restricted without even knowing it. They're not trying, but that's the mechanism that allows them to lose weight. Okay. Factoid. A lot of people like to believe that there's many different ways that you can lose weight, and that there's, weight loss is still this mystery, and we don't really fully understand why people gain weight or lose weight. Okay. That is complete hogwash. There is only one way to lose weight, period, end of story. The only way to lose weight is to induce a negative calorie balance, which means that you consume less calories than you expend. So we can do a calculation on a piece of paper to figure out how many calories you're burning to be alive, to go to the grocery store, to record a podcast, to perform exercise.
Yeah.
And then as long as you're eating less than that number of calories on a daily basis, you will lose weight, period, end of story. And if you eat more than that number of calories, then you will gain weight. It's very simple. From a thermodynamic perspective, it's irrefutable, right? So the ketogenic diet is basically just a mechanism that allows you to lose weight. Now, in the process of losing weight, what people end up also experiencing is a collection of very beneficial side effects that come along for the ride, such as, number one, lower fasting blood glucose. Well, that's pretty good. Number two, lower A1C value. Well, that's also pretty good. Number three, lower blood pressure. Well, that's pretty good. Number four, lower triglyceride value. That's awesome. Okay. Sometimes people often see lower AST and ALT, which are two liver enzymes that can become elevated when people become inflamed. And so now you see improved liver function. Okay. And so a number of different metabolic biomarkers start to unfold in the same direction. And after 6 months of being on a ketogenic diet, people often go for a blood test, and they're like, look, lower A1C, lower body weight, lower fasting glucose, lower AST, lower ALT, lower triglycerides. Like, what? This is great. I feel like $1 million. Like, things are moving in the right direction. And so it's easy to think that that's actually improving your overall health, right? Now, here's what I would say. In the short term, yes, you are probably improving your overall health because those biomarkers are moving in the right direction. But if we fast forward 2 years into the future, 5 years into the future, 20 years into the future, to try and ask a simple question: what could happen to you if you continue to consume a ketogenic diet or a low carbohydrate diet at all? What is likely to happen? Then you get a different answer. Okay. In the short term, you see a lot of metabolic improvements. In the long term, you see a lot of metabolic dysfunction. Okay. And part of the reason that metabolic dysfunction happens in the first place is because when you eat a high fat diet, like we talked about earlier, a high fat diet actually causes the state of insulin resistance. It causes an excess accumulation of saturated fat inside of your liver and muscles, which then can cause your pancreas to secrete excess insulin and can cause your blood glucose to go high. But even if it doesn't do that, and even if in the short term things look good, over the course of time, if you just fast forward, what you will likely find is that the condition of your vasculature goes south. Okay, literally the condition of blood vessels inside of your heart, your brain, your liver, your kidney, capillary blood vessels all throughout your body, they end up becoming more dysfunctional over time. They become harder, they become more rigid, they become more atherosclerotic. The pressure inside of those vessels increases, making you more likely to develop hypertension. Your LDL cholesterol begins to increase. LDL is the bad cholesterol, which is likely to increase your risk for a future cardiac event. Okay, so therefore your heart disease risk goes up, your ApoB concentration goes up, which again increases your risk for a future cardiac event. Okay, and what a lot of people report is that they may lose weight in the short term, but then their weight loss kind of plateaus. And then at that point, it's very difficult to lose any more weight, or they start to regain their weight and they start to move back up to the initial weight that they started with. Okay?
Yeah.
And then in addition to that, there's also these sort of like non-diagnosable health conditions, which is things like, number one, low energy.
Yeah.
I can't digest food. I have gas, bloating, constipation. I have diarrhea, right? I have this thing called mental fog, right? And, you know, the list goes on. So people end up with like an increased risk for many chronic diseases and an increased susceptibility to these non-diagnosable conditions. And then the kicker for me is when we wrote our book, Mastering Diabetes, we had to do, you know, countless hours of research to try and figure out what the research was saying about this thing called all-cause mortality. So all-cause mortality basically just refers to like your risk for death, your risk for premature death. And I will read for you this really quick passage from the book that says that a carefully controlled meta-analysis, which is just a fancy scientific methodology, a carefully controlled meta-analysis of 17 studies of more than 270,000 people concluded that low carbohydrate diets increase mortality risk. The authors indicated that, and I quote, systematic review and meta-analyses of worldwide reports suggested that low carbohydrate diets were associated with a significantly higher risk of all-cause mortality in the long run, and that these findings support the hypothesis that the short-term benefits of low carbohydrate diets that we talked about for weight loss in particular are potentially irrelevant because they improve your health in the short term, but they make your health worse in the long term.
Which is really looking at like a more materialistic view of life and weight and health in general.
Yes.
You're just looking at it from the outside, not the inside.
Exactly right.
And so then coming into the aspect, okay, if someone's not on keto, but they're half and half, they like eat plant-based sometimes, they also gorge on meat sometimes, or processed food or whatever, like what would your advice be to those people if they don't want to go all the way plant-based? Like, do they have a chance of, healing their diabetes?
Okay. So let's just say that you developed type 2 diabetes and you're saying, okay, cool. Like, I don't want to live with this anymore. I want to find a way out of this. Right. So think about it. There's a spectrum on the left-hand side of the spectrum. You have the ketogenic diet. On the right-hand side, you have a fully plant-based diet. And then in the middle, you have some hybrid between the two of those. Okay.
Right.
If you eat a ketogenic diet, you're likely to experience what I just explained: weight loss, reduced A1C, reduced fasting blood glucose, and you name it. And you will come to the conclusion that your diabetes is reversed. In fact, many doctors will tell you that diabetes has been reversed when in reality, it has not been reversed. You just have improved biomarkers. But the reason we know that it's not reversed is because the minute you eat anything that's carbohydrate rich, it could literally be one piece of fruit. It could be one banana. It could be one potato. It could be one bowl of quinoa. Anything that's carbohydrate rich will cause your blood glucose to go alarmingly high, which means that your glucose metabolism is still in a state of disrepair. And as long as you avoid carbohydrate rich foods, then fine, the world looks cool. But when you put carbohydrate rich foods into your diet, effectively your liver, digestive system, and pancreas cannot handle them. And that right there is by no means a reversal of the condition that you're trying, called diabetes.
Exactly. So, yeah.
That's ketogenic diet. If you're eating a plant-based diet, the opposite will happen. You're likely to drop you're likely to lose weight, lower your fasting blood glucose, lower your A1C, lower your blood pressure, lower your cholesterol, lower your triglycerides, you name it. All the same effects that you get from the ketogenic diet, but those effects will last into the future as long as you continue that methodology. Okay. So you get the short-term benefits plus the long-term benefits. But if you came to me and were like, hey, I don't really want to do this plant-based thing. I don't really want to do this ketogenic thing. I want to just be like in the middle and kind of eat some meat here and there and kind of eat some dairy here and there and then kind of eat some vegetables here and there. My answer to you would be, it's probably not going to work. You can try it. Call me in 3 months and let me know how your blood glucose is. Call me in 3 months and tell me what your medication requirements are. Okay. But from all the research we've done and from, working with more than 10,000 people over the course of time, we know without a shadow of a doubt that when you sort of tiptoe and you are caught in the middle in this no man's land about like some, higher fat foods and higher protein foods and some plant-based foods, sometimes it can almost be worse than being on one of the poles.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So my recommendation would be take a long, hard look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself a simple question, right? How much do you really want to reverse diabetes? How much do you want to reverse it? On a scale of 1 to 10, is it like a 2 or is it a 10? Okay. Where are you on that spectrum? Because that answer right there should help you determine whether or not you should move towards an eating a fully plant-based diet. Okay. If your answer to that question is like, oh yeah, like I really want to reverse it, I'm going to put myself at like an 8 out of 10, which is where
Mm-hmm.
most people would put them, 8, maybe a 9, maybe a 10, right? Then my answer to you would be eat a plant-based diet and eat as much of a plant-based diet as you can possibly eat, because it's going to fundamentally change your metabolic health and it's going to change the way you think and the way you feel as well.
Right.
But a lot of people are sort of like, like emotionally scared. And now what about Thanksgiving? What about Christmas? And what about the Super Bowl? And I'm like, stop worrying about that stuff. You're getting in your own way. You're letting your emotions dictate your metabolic health. And as long as you play that game, then your emotions will win. But if you really want your metabolic health to be improved, then prioritize your metabolic health. Find a way to make a plant-based diet delicious, which is not hard to do. You know better than anybody else. I mean, you're a vegan chef, for heaven's sakes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You know more about how to construct delicious and satisfying plant-based foods than probably anybody on the planet. So maybe you could go into some detail and teach people why eating a plant-based diet can actually be not only tasty, but like very tasty.
Well, yeah, I mean, as a chef, honestly, I'm a better chef ever since going vegan, because you realize that everything that you use to like season meat with is plants, right? And so you're using like herbs and spices and different cooking techniques to make something taste good. And so it doesn't matter what that like bulk thing is. And also, like when it comes to flavor, and there's other ways to get, all the flavors that you're looking for in your mouth. You're also going to increase the diversity of the foods that you're eating, because the reality is when you're eating like a big, piece of meat or like a super heavy dairy thing, you're full, it's very calorie dense. So you don't have a lot of room or appetite for anything else, because that's what you go to first. You're looking at everything, all the plants as condiments. And so you're able to just kind of like increase your diversity in what you're eating. And then you're able to change your taste buds into just wanting salt and fat into wanting all these other things as well. So it's kind of like this transition that happens. And from what you said too, I think the same would go for someone that's pre-diabetic, right? Like how bad do you not want to get full-blown diabetes on a scale of 1 to 10, and then use that marker to kind of go from there.
Totally. Yeah. Well said. Very well said.
Amazing. Well, before I ask you the next question, I'm wondering how much time you have, so I don't run you over.
We're good.
We're good. Okay, perfect. So the next thing I wanted to ask was, I guess let's just talk about carbohydrates, because carbohydrates are all not created equal. That's for sure. And so just, I think, if someone's listening has type 2 diabetes or any diabetes, pre-diabetic, know people that do, there is this inherent, deeply rooted fear of consuming carbohydrates, right? It is so deeply rooted. And I think the most important thing is that all carbohydrates aren't treated equal. Like I think, like if you're eating a bowl of quinoa versus like a Twinkie, like of course it's just different. It's just like a different thing that you're eating. So I'd love for you to kind of go into carbohydrates and how it's like carbs are one of the biggest misconceptions about, around diabetes treatment.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to talk about. Okay. So most people have no idea what a carbohydrate actually is.
True.
And that's like part of the problem, right? Mm-hmm. So people fear eating carbs and they eat a low carbohydrate diet and they make the assumption that carbs are bad for them and they're going to make me diabetic and they're going to make me gain weight. But if you ask them to draw a carbohydrate on a piece of paper or tell me, what is the molecular structure of a carbohydrate? Most people are like, I don't know what you're talking about. Why would I need to know that, right? But it's important. It's very important to understand that, because then you understand a lot more about their physiology and what role they play inside of the human body, right?
Right.
So I actually have this necklace here that you can see for those of you that are watching the video, right? So this necklace is basically just nothing but a collection of beads, right? So in this example, we basically have each bead represents what's called a monosaccharide. Okay, so a monosaccharide is, in biology, they're technically referred to as sugar molecules, right? I don't like to use the word sugar because sugar is a very confusing word in today's in the rhetoric that we've created.
Yes.
But to be technically accurate, we're going to call these monosaccharide molecules. And so these monosaccharides have names like glucose, fructose, mannose, xylose. Okay, usually they end in the letters OSE. And so if you take these monosaccharides and you construct them into molecules that end up looking like this necklace right here, you can then take this necklace and you can fold it into a crazy three-dimensional structure like this, and it can exist inside of a food like this as a carbohydrate, right? So when you consume that carbohydrate, the question is, do you have the enzymatic machinery to be able to detect what that thing is and then cut it into its individual pieces once again, and then absorb those individual monosaccharides into your blood to use them for energy, to transport them to tissues and use them for energy, okay? So the reason that it's important to understand what a carbohydrate is because they come in different forms in nature, right? So in the whole food world, okay, the whole food world contains the four most high carbohydrate types of foods that you'll find are fruits, starchy vegetables like potatoes and yams and squashes, and I'm going to put corn in that category, even though it's technically not a root vegetable, okay? And then we're going to go with legumes like beans, peas, and lentils, and then we're also going to go with whole grains, okay? So fruits, starchy vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. Those four foods are the most carbohydrate-rich foods that you can find in nature. When you consume those foods, the carbohydrates that you're consuming are what are referred to as whole carbohydrates because they come prepackaged with vitamins, minerals, fiber, water, antioxidants, and phytochemicals, okay? So you can think of them as like, they're not just packets of sugar, which is what most people believe. They're actually long chain three-dimensional carbohydrate molecules that are packed inside of this three-dimensional matrix. Literally, it's a matrix of a collection of macronutrients and micronutrients together. It's very complex. And when you consume that food, it takes time for your digestive system, in your small intestine in particular, to secrete the necessary enzymes to figure out what the heck that thing is. Okay, so you have to secrete these things called carbohydrases and proteases and lipases and a whole collection of digestive enzymes whose responsibility is to act on those carbohydrate molecules and protein molecules and fat molecules and vitamins and minerals and fiber, et cetera, to be able to detect what they are and then start to unfold them and then start to cut them and start to absorb them into your blood, okay? It's a time-consuming process, and that's a good thing because time is your friend when it comes to digestive biochemistry. If you eat a potato and you get a decent amount of carbohydrate energy from that potato, those carbohydrate chains are not going to be fully broken down and absorbed into your blood for hours. Okay, and that's a good thing because that leads to a slower rise in blood glucose and then a slower return back to baseline. And that time is actually your friend because you don't want rapid spikes of blood glucose or rapid increases in concentration of blood glucose and then rapid falls. That's what makes tissues annoyed, okay? Now, contrast that against eating a Twinkie like you mentioned earlier, okay? Whether you're eating a Twinkie, whether you're eating cookies, brownies, cupcakes, birthday cake, sodas.
Just name all my favorite desserts, eclairs, donuts.
You're like, oh, this isn't looking good for me right now. Donuts, yeah. Okay, any of those refined carbohydrate-rich foods, okay? Refined carbohydrate-rich foods act very differently because if you deconstruct a refined carbohydrate-rich food, like let's do a donut, okay? And we ask ourselves a simple question. We want to figure out how much macronutrients are in that donut and then how much micronutrients. So the macronutrients are fat, protein, carbohydrate, okay? The donut comes prepackaged with a significant amount of fat. The donut comes prepackaged with probably a minimal amount of protein, a very small amount, and it comes prepackaged with a lot of carbohydrate, okay? And the carbohydrate that we're looking at is actually synthetic carbohydrate or carbohydrate that's been refined from its original plant sources, okay? Then in addition, the next question is, well, how many micronutrients? Okay. How many vitamins are in your donut?
I mean, oops. None. That was the universe being like,
Yeah, you're like, can I phone a friend?
Yeah, right. 0.
Okay.
I mean, very little, if any.
Yeah, very little, if any. So nobody eats donuts for vitamins. Okay. Minerals. You think there's a lot of minerals inside of your donut?
No.
No. Okay. Fiber.
A little.
Probably
Maybe,
a small amount.
Yeah, like a little bit. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Water. And I'm specifically choosing water because water is actually not a nutrient, but it helps nutrient absorption.
Yes, it is very important. I mean, chef's perspective, not a lot. I mean, especially when you're talking about a donut, right? You use like milk usually, or like if I'm making a vegan donut, some sort of plant-based milk, but not a whole lot, because a lot of times, right, the starch absorbs, or like the flour absorbs a lot of that water already.
Correct. Correct. So yeah, so its water content is probably like medium to low.
Right.
Okay. So vitamins, minerals, fiber, water, and then antioxidants.
I mean, unless there's like a blueberry jam on the inside of it.
Yeah, and even then, you've probably cooked that thing to death, so there's probably very little. Okay, and then the last thing is called phytochemicals. And phytochemicals are these like tiny little medicinal chemicals that lower blood pressure, lower blood glucose. They're anti-carcinogenic and beyond, that you find in the natural world.
Exactly.
In a donut, I'd be willing to argue that you have 0 phytochemicals.
Yeah.
Okay? So from a nutrition perspective, a donut is basically mainly a combination of refined carbohydrate and fat with effectively 0 micronutrient value, or a very small amount of micronutrients. So you consume that donut, it goes into your mouth, it travels down your esophagus, it gets inside of your stomach and your small intestine. And your small intestine, the same enzymatic machinery goes to work on it to try and figure out what is this stuff and how do I break it apart and how do I absorb these nutrients into the blood. There's very little fiber. There's very little vitamins, minerals, water, antioxidants, phytochemicals. And as a result of that, the speed at which those digestive enzymes can work on the donut is a lot faster, because there's less of a 3-dimensional matrix that's slowing it down. In other words, there's less of a break. There's less fiber in the way to slow down the action of those enzymes. And so as a result of that, you consume the donut, and then you can literally plot your blood glucose over the course of time. And what you're likely to find is a much more rapid rise in your blood glucose value.
Right.
And then, it might take a long time for that blood glucose to come back down. Okay. So as a result of that, people, what they should be saying is, I'm going to try and limit my intake of refined carbohydrates. Right. But they don't say that. What people say is, I'm eating a low carb diet because carbs are bad for me. Right. But in reality, it's the refined carbohydrate rich foods which are causing metabolic dysfunction. The whole carbohydrate rich foods are improving metabolic function. Okay. So we have to get away from this idea that like all carbs are bad. And it's a very simplistic model that just isn't biologically accurate. And what I want people to understand is that no matter how much pre-programming you've received over the course of time to tell you that potatoes will make you diabetic and that apples will make you diabetic and that bananas are bad for you, please, please, please undo that information. That is incorrect information. The only way that your blood glucose can become can go high as a result of eating whole carbohydrates is if your saturated fat intake is already high to begin with. In other words, if you're eating a diet that's high in fat, okay, in a high fat environment, then carbohydrate metabolism doesn't really work that well. So you have to first lower your fat environment, and then carbohydrate metabolism can unfold in exactly the way it was supposed to, exactly the way it was designed.
Perfectly said. Honestly, I love the way you worded all of that. I'm thinking about my client specifically. He wanted me to ask you what would be like an ideal mastering diabetes friendly dessert other than mangoes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you want a diabetes friendly dessert other than mangoes. Okay. There's so many options here. I'm sure you're familiar with nice cream or like ice cream made from bananas, right?
Yeah, that's
Very
a good
simple.
one.
Go take some bananas, freeze them, and then run them through a blender, run them through a Yo Nano machine, and then turn it into ice cream. That's a great thing. Oh, this is one that I haven't actually tried this. I read about this one not too long ago. Apparently in Japan, because they're obsessed with sweet potatoes, they literally take sweet potatoes and they take like a popsicle, I don't know, stick, and they jab it right through the back of it. And then they put the whole thing in the freezer and they just freeze it for 24 hours or so. And then they pull it out of the freezer when they're ready to eat it. And they literally lick it as if it were
the
a
sweet
lollipop.
potato. Oh my God.
They kind of like lick the sweet potato. And
Well, it's got to be cooked, obviously.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It is cooked.
Okay. I was like, what?
My fault. It's cooked to begin with. Then you stick a skewer in it. Then you freeze it. And then you basically, eat it as though it were a popsicle. And apparently it's incredibly tasty, but I have yet to try it. So maybe you can report back on that one.
Interesting. And yeah, like when it comes to like sweets too, when you look at, or like if you want to make a diabetes friendly cake, for instance, you would use like whole dates and like quinoa flour and bananas and like a mashed applesauce. And like, that's kind of like how I make my desserts.
Bingo.
Is when you can kind of use like the natural world. I mean, there's so much natural sugar in the natural world that you can use to sweeten something so that it tastes really yummy, but you're also getting all of those great complex carbohydrates like quinoa flour, brown rice flour, cassava flour. And so, yeah, that's like my little take on the desserts. Shout out to my client, Frank, for the question. He asked me that like 6 times. He's like, make sure you ask him about desserts.
Someone's got a sweet tooth.
Totally. Yeah, that's awesome. So I also wanted to ask you about, so if there's someone listening who has someone in their life that is pre-diabetic, has type 2 diabetes, and they want to help them, but they don't want to seem like overbearing, and they want to kind of like steer them in the right direction. Maybe their doctor's giving them wrong information. Do you have any advice for those people who want to help someone that they love? I mean, other than, of course, reading your book, but maybe if they're more stubborn than that, like what you got for them?
Okay. So here's what I recommend. Let's go backwards in time to 2000. I think it was 2017. I got an invitation to go speak at a hospital system. This is down in Southern California. And it was this place, the Torrance Memorial Medical Center. So they asked me to give a talk about diabetes. And so I gave a talk. It was like an hour long, and members of my team recorded it. And then we put it on YouTube, and we're just sort of like, hey, let's see what this thing does. Let's see if it helps people out, right? 1.7 million views later.
Huge.
People have been telling us that this one video has changed the way that they think about diabetes, right? Like fundamentally changed the way that they view diabetes and think about diabetes. And it's led to a lot of improvement, right? So the way to find that video would be go to YouTube and type in the words insulin resistance diet. Okay. Insulin resistance diet. And there's a whole bunch of results that will pop up. Just go to the one where, I don't know, you can see my face, or you can see one from Mastering Diabetes. That's the name of our channel. Okay. That's the one you're looking for. It's about a 60-minute long video. Just watch that video. Just literally sit back, watch that video. And then that's your starting point. Okay. That right there, it gives like a relatively good summary of what diabetes is truly about and how you actually have more power than you may believe. And you have more power than the medical world may have, told you do. So that's where I would start. And then, if that intrigues you and you feel like it's actually something that you could do, then I would recommend picking up the Mastering Diabetes book. Obviously, whatever I wrote that book, so I have a vested interest in that, but we tried to put together as much information in that book as possible to really help people. And so far we've gotten a pretty overwhelmingly positive feedback from our audience members.
Yeah, that book is a great resource for me, for my clients, people in my life. I'm always here, read this and then we'll talk.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. It needed to be birthed into the world, and I'm so glad you guys did. So I'm wondering what you eat in a day.
What do I eat in a day? Okay. For breakfast, I usually eat nothing but fruits. So it depends on whatever's in season. So like right now it's the winter time. So I eat bananas, and when I can find some papayas, because they happen to be available, I'll just combine bananas, papayas. Maybe I'll put some like dates in a bowl, right? And I will like just combine them. I get this stuff called PB2, which is like a peanut powder. I just love the flavor. So I'll take some of that and I'll just sprinkle it on top, and it kind of give me like a nice
interesting. Okay.
And then I will eat that. That's it. That's breakfast right there. I'll usually go work out, and then by the time I come back, I'm very hungry, and that's when I make a giant smoothie bowl. So I will blend together some frozen fruits like frozen berries, frozen bananas, and then I will top it off with a couple more bananas, surprise, maybe some more dates, maybe some more raisins, and then maybe I'll cut a couple of apples on top of that, and then sprinkle some like cocoa nibs on top, and then I will just polish that thing off. By the time the middle of the afternoon rolls around is usually when I eat my third meal of the day. And that's when I like to switch over to eating more savory foods. So I'm just flat out obsessed with garbanzo beans.
Dude, me too, honestly.
You too?
Oh my God. It's like insane.
Okay. I'm gonna start a like garbanzo bean, like closet garbanzo bean lover.
They're the best. Yeah.
Yeah. So however I can get those into my, I don't care. Like usually there's like a giant pot of garbanzo beans that I made earlier in the week, and I will just spoon them into a bowl and like, just hose it down. Or I will, I don't know, kind of mash it a little bit, add some apples to it, add some dill to that, maybe put some nutritional yeast on there and turn it into a little bit more of like a, I don't know, kind of like a tuna salad type of thing. Right. Yeah. And then I'll pound that. And then dinner rolls around, and it's usually, dinner time is where we get a little bit more creative. So sometimes salads, I'm not a huge salad person. Potatoes, like any color potato, red potato, white potato, sweet potato.
I love potatoes. Honestly, I could live on potatoes.
I know. Isn't it insane how good they are?
So good, especially organic, like local potatoes are like, I've been getting these purple ones from they're the small little purple ones from the farmer's market, and they're purple on the outside and bright pink when you cut into them. And the flavor is just like unreal. I'm addicted.
Oh man. How do you make those?
All sorts of ways. I'll put seasonings on them. I'll put them in the air fryer. Sometimes I'll boil them and then I'll smash them and then I'll bake them so they get really crispy. All sorts of ways.
Wow. Okay. I'm coming over to your house. I want to eat some of those.
Yeah. So good. California though. We're lucky.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. So if I do the same thing. We do air fried potatoes and of any color, shape, or size.
Yes.
And then, sometimes I'll eat lentils as well, along with those.
Love lentils. Yeah.
And that pretty much calls it a day right there. Pretty happy campers.
Love that. What about when you're traveling? Oops.
Weird, but
oh, there you are. Okay. What about when you're traveling?
Nope. Sorry. Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay. Sorry. So when I'm traveling, my newest thing is to bring cans of chickpeas and a can opener with me. I kid you not. I'm that dude who's going through the security line, and they have to like open up my bag and pull out a bunch of cans of chickpeas.
Oh my God, that is so awesome. Yeah, I travel with food too.
What do you normally take?
A lot of times, like I'll take just like my things that make food taste good. So a lot of like spices and different salts that I like and things like that. Sometimes I have this like good mushroom based protein powder that I really like. Nice. But yeah, because I've traveled a lot before, and I've noticed that it's really easy for me to find like beans and rice and vegetables, but it's like I'm all about flavor. And a lot of times they just like, especially when you're just going from place to place, or you're, at a layover or something, there's just like nothing to make anything taste good.
It's so true. It's so true.
So yeah, I have like this hemp seed walnut Parmesan that I make that's in my cookbook, and I'll like bring a jar of that and like put it on everything, which I really like.
I'm going to go pick up a copy. I'm embarrassed to say that I don't have your cookbook in front of me right now, but I'm going to go pick up a copy right now. You're making me very hungry.
Yeah, I'll send you one. I'm so happy to send you one. So,
yeah, thank you.
Okay, I do this with let's see. Okay, I do this all of my guests. I'm just going to do a quick speed round really quick so people can get to know you a little bit better.
Let's do it.
And then we're good to go. So I think I know the answer to this, but do you like fruits or veggies better?
Fruits, no question.
Yeah, totally. You're
No
actually
question.
like the first person to say fruits this whole season.
Really?
Yeah, but I've been interviewing a lot of doctors like Dr. Michael Greger, Dr. Clapper. They're all really going strong for the veggies. So
Interesting. Okay.
yeah. Okay, what about coffee or tea?
Tea. I'm not a coffee person. I never like coffee. So definitely
Me
like tea.
too.
Nice.
Literally
Whimsy.
always have tea, always have tea. Breakfast or dinner?
Breakfast.
Oh, okay. Okay. You love those smoothie bowls. I love that. My husband will love
Absolutely.
that. He could literally live off smoothie bowls. I get so tired of them, but like every day he's got a smoothie bowl in the fridge for me, like clockwork. So
Yeah.
yeah.
You're tell your husband if he wants to make a smoothie bowl for me too on a daily basis.
Okay.
Tell you. I'm accepting smoothie bowl.
It might melt by the time it gets to Philly, but who knows?
I'm sure it'll still be very tasty.
Yeah, it's true, true. Okay, are you a late night person or an early riser?
Early riser, no question. No
God,
question.
every single person I've interviewed is an early riser, and I am
Wow.
not. I'm really trying to get there, but
Huh.
ooh, okay, books or podcasts?
Podcasts these days for sure.
Ooh, love it. Okay,
Yeah.
what's your current favorite podcast other than your own?
Okay. My current favorite podcast. I love learning about Bitcoin. And I've been in the Bitcoin game for like 4+ years now. And
Wow.
so there's one podcast called What Bitcoin Did by a guy named Peter McCormick.
Okay.
And I can't get enough of that podcast.
Okay, my husband's gonna love that recommendation. He's like nerds out on it all the time too. I was not
Oh,
expecting
nice.
that. I love that. Okay, what Bitcoin did. Good to know.
Yep.
What are you most looking forward to in 2022?
What am I most looking forward to? Okay. My wife and I would like to spend as much time as possible. We're gonna try and maximize our time spent in the sun. Okay.
Hallelujah. Thank you for
So
that.
we just want as much sun. And I'm gonna also parlay that with we have a brand new daughter. Her name is Indigo. And she was
Indigo.
born 3.5 months ago. And
Congratulations.
thank you. Part of what we want to gift her as a newborn on this planet is the gift of being outside and in the sun as much as possible. So we want to just like, I'm looking forward to like her feeling it and being outside and like just starting to love the same type of lifestyle that my wife and I do. And from what we can tell so far, she really likes it.
That's so beautiful. I have very similar visions for my future children. That's why I live in San Diego, because I am a sun addict. I like need as much sun as possible. So
I know.
I love
amazing.
that. Indigo
Yeah,
is such a beautiful name too. I love
Thank
it.
you. Thank you.
That's so exciting. Yay, congratulations. Okay, I just got totally distracted by that. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Ooh, what advice would I give to my younger self? I would say, don't take life too seriously and don't forget to have fun.
Yes, so important, especially during these times. Times are hard right now, but sometimes you just got to let it all go. Have fun anyway,
What would you say?
Huh?
Do you have any
what would
response?
advice would I give to my younger self? Probably to like party less.
Oh, that's a good one.
Like party less. I was in the Burning Man community and I partied a lot. I did a lot of recreational drugs and I just I was very free spirited. I had no boundaries, also because I had chronic pain too. So I think my advice to my younger self would be to party less and go inward more, not be so afraid of facing yourself,
Got it. I like it.
Yeah, very honest. What's two more questions. What was the best decision of your career?
Best decision of my career was to leave corporate America and start a business to try and help people.
Amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
And then what's one thing about you that would surprise people?
I love skydiving.
Oh my gosh. Really?
Love skydiving.
Do you go by yourself?
No, I would love to get to a point where I can do that. I was going to get trained and then my wife told me that she strongly opposed that. And I was like, I get it.
Yeah,
I understand.
I would say the same.
But I think in our lifetime, it's going to be possible to get in a rocket ship and like either go to the moon or like go to the outer edges of the atmosphere. And if that opportunity exists, I am literally first on that list. Like nobody's going to beat me to space. It's because like I just have this fascination with like falling out of an airplane or getting in a rocket and going really fast. Like there's nothing in life that would make me happier than that.
Wow. Okay. That definitely surprised me for sure. But I mean, I went skydiving a couple of years ago. It was wild. It's almost like when you're falling, everything else disappears. Like nothing else matters. Like you don't think about the fact that you could die. You don't think about how far down you are, like the earth is. You're just kind of as absolutely present as you can be. And it's such a thrill. So
yeah,
I get it.
You don't have a choice. You're just like, I'm in this right now. And like, there's nothing else that I care about.
Exactly. So just to finish it out, do you have any final words of wisdom for our listeners before I let you go?
I would say, yeah. So the food that you eat matters. The food that you eat absolutely matters. And eating a plant-based diet is literally the most powerful prescription medication that you will ever take. So try not to think of it as though it's like a life sentence and that it is, something that you're being forced to do. Do it because you want to do it. Do it because you like it, and do it because it is really tasty. It adds value to your life, and it will help you live the most optimal way possible. Plant-based nutrition is the gift that keeps on giving, and if you allow it to be, it can literally transform your life.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.